Hello.
Hello,
Jorge, how are you?
hello. Fine. It's nice that we have you here again. You know Martin, you know me, and now we have
Absolutely.
Neale Donald, Walsch, Guyus Seralius, and Anke von Eckstaedt. It's very sensational today that we have here so many great guests. Yeah. Okay. I
Neil,
think
good to meet you
yeah. I think we
virtually.
can start. Yeah, as at first, hello and welcome. Yeah, we are spread all over the world again. That's why we meet in at completely different times. For some, it is in the evening. For some, it is in the afternoon. And Martin sits in Cologne. Anke sits on a German island of Usedom. She's in the furthest easternmost tip of Germany. It is very close to Poland.
Hmm.
And Gaius sits in Texas. Eben, you sit in North Carolina, right?
In Virginia right now,
Yeah,
Charlottesville, Virginia.
yeah. And Neil, you sit in Oregon, right? Yeah. That means we are today international. I think I introduce myself first. I'm Torge Meyer. I'm 31 years old and I come from the north of Germany near Hamburg. And I'm chairman and founder of a League of Pantheists. That's our association. And I also run Pantheismus TV, this channel here. And we have Guyus Seralius here. He is pantheist, YouTuber, artist, and writer, and he wrote the book The Forever All. He also runs an English version of the channel Pantheism TV. Yeah. And we have Martin Sagel. He lives in the west of Germany. He's a real estate agent, but 2009, he wrote a very nice spiritual book, which is called Alles Eins. Um, that's the German title, the English title, All is One. And this year he will finish the English translation so that you can also
English
read,
translation.
yeah, that you can also read his great work in English as well. And it's nice that we have him here. And because he founded with us the German Association Liga der Pantheisten, League of Pantheists. And yeah, his book is a book of 300 pages, and we can read in this book 1,000 of wise quotations. He made a kind of analysis of all religions, and at the end, I say, Martin, heartily welcome to our video talk. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
Genau.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also
Yeah,
many
and
quotations from conversations with God.
yeah.
Inside. I
And
paid for the license.
yeah, and we have again Anke von Eckstaedt. She also had a native experience in 2009, like Dr. Eben Alexander, and she wrote it down in the book Elysium cum spiritu Dei. She tells us more about her native experience later. And Dr. Eben Alexander, author and neurosurgeon, he wrote down his native experience in 2008 in his work Proof of Heaven. This book has reached millions of people and continues to receive a lot of attention today, but he has also written other powerful books like Map of Heaven. And Neale is the author of a well-known Conversations with God books. His book have been translated into many languages and have helped millions of people. It has become a foundation for me. And I think without these books, I wouldn't be sitting here today. And we must say, Neale has also written other spiritual books that have equally strong content. Yeah.
For all of us.
First question on you, Neale. Did you ever heard of Eben's near-death experience?
I'm not sure I heard of his experience in particular specifically, but of course I have heard of near-death experiences, and I've looked into them, with great wonder and deep curiosity and a special awareness that, of course, and I didn't have a near-death experience myself, but I did have an out-of-body experience. And I'm not quite sure there's a huge difference between an OBE and an NDE in terms of what the psyche moves through and what the soul experiences. But I was so excited when Eben Alexander created his book, Proof of Heaven, because are there three more powerful words that could be put into any language on this planet? Three more exciting, more powerful, more uplifting, and more spiritually inspiring words than those three words. Proof of Heaven. What a powerful, powerful title.
Yeah.
And one almost doesn't need to pick up the book, given that the title tells us everything we need to know, that the existence of heaven has been proven. So I'm so grateful to Eden for producing that material, and bringing that forward for the rest of us.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Neale.
Eben, can you tell Neale what happened to you and what you saw in your near-death experience?
Yeah, I think the important thing to point out is, as a neurosurgeon, neuroscientist, there were some details of the medical parameters of my case that were very contributory to my understanding, because I simply had this beautiful, fantastic, amazing experience that started in what I call the earthworm eye view, a primitive course unresponsive realm. But I was led through this beautiful light portal into this brilliant ultra-real gateway valley with many earth-like features, but also profound spiritual features, like angelic choirs and souls between lives dancing below, and a tremendous amount of beauty without any death or decay. In many ways, like Plato's world of ideals, but for the individual soul. And as I said, it's only a gateway. That was only a stepping stone to higher levels. And the highest levels, what I call the core that I ascended to through light portals, again, the core was a complete oneness with that infinitely loving God force. And I know many other near-death experiencers have described something similar. And that's why we come back from these experiences knowing that death is nothing to fear. It's actually a transition to a kind of a higher state of consciousness. It's not a diminution of consciousness, which is what I, as a materialist, formerly materialist neuroscientist, would have predicted. But it's the exact opposite, this beautiful expansion into a world of love, and especially in that core realm, when all the dualities of our world, masculine, feminine, good, bad, light, dark, etc., all of those are resolved into oneness with that purity of that loving God force. And the thing that's most impressive when you study not just my near-death experiences, but millions of others, is you start finding these patterns of this beautiful, loving presence that we can trust in. And I think in many ways, I believe the beauty of Neale's message to the world is also conveyed through near-death experiences, where the purity of that love and how we're all in this together, and it's really about kindness, compassion, and mercy, really comes to the fore. And I meditate daily. I use a form of binaural beat brainwave entrainment, but it's a form of going deep within conscious awareness. And once you realize your consciousness is not created by the physical brain, but is shared with the universe, that's where exploring consciousness gains tremendous power and value in our lives. So in a nutshell, that was kind of my journey. There's much more to it, but I don't want to spend time on that when people can read Proof of Heaven, or they can look at the many, YouTube videos, et cetera, to get more of the story. But that's kind of the essence of it, that it was a beautiful dive into this brilliant, loving realm where God was the very source of my conscious awareness, far beyond any kind of ego consciousness, of course. And then a realization that in the kind of modern scientific sense, I've spent 15 years working with other scientists since my coma, trying to make sense of all this. But it really points to this oneness we have in that sharing with that God mind that is never distant from us at all, and that it's a binding force of love. That's the most comforting aspect of it. And that's kind of a universal gift that comes back from near-death experiences. So I was very blessed, but so have been many other people. And as Neale has pointed out, you don't have to have a near-death experience to get to this same kind of knowledge. That's exactly why we encourage people to, meditation, deep centering prayer, what have you, the modes of going within are the ways of connecting with that infinitely powerful and loving God force that returns us to wholeness and healing.
It's a shame that he doesn't have the articulative skills to explain it specifically for us all to understand it.
Oh, well,
Sarcasm.
I'll keep trying.
You know, oh, that's wonderful, Eden. I'm having fun with you because, of course, it's a wonderful, wonderful description and something we can all really embrace and step into, you know, with such a level of joy and happiness. And I don't want to sound like I'm tagging on or trying to steal some of that thunder, but my out-of-body experience it was quite similar, and especially with the end, you know, being in the presence of that unbelievable light. And the message that I received was the message that we all receive. Well done, good and faithful servant.
Neale, let me ask, you said that you had an out-of-body experience. Was it active or was it passive? Also, you tried to do it, or was it a passive experience?
No, very, very passive. I was simply lying on the couch, having a nap, taking a nap in my house. And suddenly I was out of my body. I don't understand how that happened, but I suddenly experienced I love what Eden just said about your consciousness, but I experienced, until then I thought my consciousness was a part of my physical body. And only then did I realize, oh, I can be in two places at once. I mean, I was looking down on my body, and I didn't understand in the moment when it happened. I didn't understand how that was possible. How can I be looking down on my body? And then I realized, oh my gosh, I'm not that. I'm not that. That's just a means by which what I am was expressing itself, but I am not that. And then I turned, I was turned. I don't think I didn't voluntarily turn. I felt myself being turned in a different direction. And I swooped up. I just was swooped up and scooped up like the speed of light into, I won't bother describing the whole long journey and the whole experience, all of which had happened in 3 or 4 seconds. But then I did find myself in the presence of that unbelievably awesome feeling and light and just a presence. You are my son in whom I am well pleased. And I know I remember feeling so embarrassed. I thought, no, not me. I couldn't because I knew all the things that I had done in my life that I wasn't proud of and remain, by the way, not proud of. But I couldn't be in that presence of that light, the utter perfection. But that's when I was allowed to know, you don't understand, Neale, you are perfect just as you are, mistakes and all. And I understood what pure love was about, that pure love accepts us exactly as we are and allows us to, if we choose to, at the soul level, if we choose to, we don't have to, we're not required to, but if we choose to come back and reincarnate and use this physical experience either on this planet or anywhere else in the cosmos again, we're welcome to do so and to see if we wish to engage in our physical life in a way which allows us to express more fully and more completely our true identity. Could I end my little diatribe here by saying this? What I came back from that experience knowing is, this is not who I am. This is not who I am. These are pieces of equipment that are being used by who I am, but who I am is simply an individuation of divinity.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, I bought some books to practice out-of-body experience, also to run an active out-of-body experience. And then I tried it many weeks, many months, and then one day it happened that I felt a vibration, and then now the body is Also the inside body is leaving the body, and then I stopped it because I got in fear. Not in fear, and I had a proof already. Then for me it was enough to know that it's different, that body and the other body. In German we call it Astralkörper, astral body. I don't know if it's the same in English.
Right. Astral body.
Astral body, yeah, the inside body. And I felt that it's going out. And then I stopped it. I said, okay, no, it's enough for me.
You know, a similar thing happened to me. I used to get them when I was younger. So I don't really get them anymore, but there were times it was an unusual sensation. But then there were times where it was, I don't know, a little scary, you know, the sensation of it. And so almost the same thing happened to me where I was trying to make them happen. Because, you know, at first it happened on its own, passively, but then I was trying to make them happen. But then I didn't want it to happen because it spooked me. It was just a weird sensation and I didn't quite understand it. But yeah, I used to get those quite a bit when I was much younger, but haven't had one in years, many years. So
I think a lot of people have that kind of fear when they feel that vibration when you're about to go out of body.
Exactly.
And
Yes.
you feel that it's like an earthquake going on. And to some people, they shut it down. But the best thing is if you just learn to ride with that, if you anticipate it, you can really, then you're out of body. And
I also wondered, I remember wondering if I stayed away too long, could that make the transcendence permanent and I couldn't get back? So that kind of scared me, the thought that I couldn't return. Because, you know, once you stay away for so long, I didn't know what could happen, that it might even cause my death. So I think that was one of the things subconsciously that kind of spooked me a little bit. And so I would try to snap back, you know, get back into it and wake back up and try to refrain from having those happen. But the sensation of it and the experience of it was very valuable to me. I enjoyed the fact that I had them and that I could analyze it and experience that, even though they were a little spooky at times.
You know what's really funny, Guyus? You said that you were afraid at one point that, you know, if you stayed there too long, you might not be able to return. And for me, the experience was precisely the opposite. When I was on the other side, I thought, why would I want to return? I'm perfectly happy if somebody says to me, you have to stay here forever. I would say, fair enough. I'm there. I'm with you. Why would I want to return? And so when I did wind up waking back up on that couch and I swooped back into my body, my arms felt so heavy. I'm not kidding you. My whole body felt like it weighed a ton. And it was all I could do to lift my arm up. It was, you know, and when I did roll off the couch, I thought, why would I want to be back here? And I had to search inside of me to find what the French would call a raison d'être, a reason for being.
Yeah.
And I have important information. We have Anke von Eckstaedt here. Anke, you wrote a text for us today about your...
wrote a text. My English is not so good, so I translated my experience in English.
Yeah.
Don't wrote a text. I remember my experience, and I would like to briefly tell you about my experience. But first, an out-of-body experience is very different than a near-death experience. And sometimes you still fear, for example, you can feel fear. And in a near-death experience, there is no fear anymore. I have to say that I did not deal with near-death experiences before. When I had my encounter with the spiritual world, I did not know what others had experienced. When I was 35, I became seriously ill. After a miscarriage, I developed a thrombosis and eventually a fulminant pulmonary embolism. I was in the hospital. The doctors had told me that there was nothing more we could do, that we had to wait and see, but it was just too late. So I prayed. I prayed to have enough time to sort everything out. What I wanted was to make peace with everyone before I die. So first I called my mother. I talked to a lot of different people, of friends I have had arguments with, and I told everyone that I loved them and that everything was fine. I have forgiven everyone, everything. I realized it was coming to an end. I could hardly pray. I felt cold and sleepy, and of course I was scared. I knew that I was dying now. And then I prayed and I said, thank you, Lord, for my life, for all what had happened. And then I said the bravest sentence of my life. I said the words from Jesus, and I said to him, into your hands I commend my spirit. And then I waited. I thought something had happened now. But what will happen? Am I seeing Jesus now, or my father, he died before, or a burning bush? I looked out of the window into the dark night, and it was silent for a moment. I stopped praying. It was absolute silence. And then someone came into the room. A friend, a young man in a suit. This is typically me. This is typically Anke to see a man in a suit. He stood quietly at the foot of the bed, and I stood up to greet him. Then I heard a shrill alarm and looked to the bed. The bed was empty. And I looked at the friend again, and the sound became quieter. And then a curtain opened, like on a stage in a theater. It was dark behind, and we walked through it together. It became quiet and dark, and I felt completely safe. It was the complete absence of fear. I felt the friend next to me. He remained silent. He did not touch me, but I did not feel alone. And I was no longer myself, Anke. I was no longer a daughter or a mother. I was no longer a wife or a friend. It was me. And then threads of light ran through the room. They slowly lit it up, and I noticed that I was in a hunch room. I saw creatures, and they were sitting a little away from me. They were very large, and only one of them spoke to me. He discussed life of Anke with me. He discussed love. And he asked me what I mean when I speak about love. What was remarkable was that it was no him who judged me, but me. I came to the conclusion that I had only acted out of love or fear. And then he asked me what I would do, what I would change if I had the chance. And I told him that I tried to act out of love and no longer out of fear. That I probably could not change anything because that is just how I am. But that I would live my love without fear. And then he showed me a lot of pictures. I remember that he showed me pictures, but I forgot the pictures themselves. But I did not forget his question. He asked me, "Are you ready for this?" And I answered, "Of course I'm ready." And then suddenly I felt terribly cold and terrified. There was a bright light right in front of me, and I was shocked. I saw a man in front of me, all in white, and he was shouting something to me way too loud. He said, "Stay with me, look at me, what is your name?" I have had so a lot of fear at this moment, and I did not know anything. I thought at this moment that I was dead. It took me many minutes until I understood that this was the doctor who wanted to confirm my death, and that he shone a light in my eyes to see the reflexes. That was 15 years ago now. I survived so long and I changed everything. Not only could I not forget this experience, but the spiritual world has been present in every moment since then. When they want it, I hear them and I listen to them. I have to hear them, and I can hear them. And if they want that I obey, they tell it twice. I'm certainly not a saint. I have temper. I'm sometimes grieve, sometimes I get angry, but I feel the spiritual world inside me all the time, and I can no longer act out of fear anymore. Okay, I can rant. I am definitely afraid, but I cannot act out of fear or anger. I get over these feelings before I say or do anything. I was an actress in my life before this experience, and I never went back to the stage. I lead services in church today. I do not reinterpret theology, but I talk about the love of God within the existing theology. I am talking about peace within ourselves, and about the fact that we can and we have to carry this peace into the world.
Thank you, Anke. Thank you, thank you.
You know, it's sad for me. I think, and what wonderful testimony, interesting choice of words for me, but what a wonderful testimony from all of you and all of us. We've all had experiences that are similar enough that the possibility of coincidence is reduced to near zero. This must be the way things are in many, many respects. But I wonder, I have a question to ask. Would it be necessary for all of us on Earth to have a near-death experience in order for us to change the way we are living our lives? Is there nothing short of that that could bring sanity to the human equation and to our
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'd like to think that it would be the testimony of those like you and Eben who can communicate, hopefully, those things, as you're doing now. So I would like to think that it would not take a near-death experience for most people. And I think they do read testimonies, and it does, I think, convince a lot of people. And so it has helped to create a positive shift in the world. And hopefully people such as yourself and Dr. Alexander and others continue to do the same, continue to spread that word. And
I would also point out Ken Ring, who was one of the founding fathers of the International Association of Near-Death Studies, IANDS.org, back in the 70s. Well, he wrote in the, I think it was the late 80s, early 90s, a very good paper about how just knowing about NDEs for many people can give the same transformational benefits that you get out of the NDE itself. So my answer would be no, we don't need everyone to have an NDE. In fact, I would say for any scientists interested in all this, if you simply are familiar with some of the accounts, for example, at iands.org or nderf.org, that's the Near-Death Experience Research Foundation that the Longs run out of Louisiana, are now out of Kentucky. But anyway, there's also BigelowInstitute.org and a whole set of papers there that describe kind of the scientific interpretation of afterlife studies. So there's plenty of information out there for people to learn much more about this, both scientifically and spiritually, so that you don't have to have your own NDE. The only thing I would add to that is certainly a program of regular prayer, centering prayer or meditation, ways of turning off the ego voice in the head, because that little running stream of thoughts in our head is not who we are. That's not our consciousness. That's simply basically a parlor trick, but it's the awareness that we can cultivate and develop. And I think that's where all of these kind of interactions of sentient beings, of humans, with these extraordinary events leads to our ability to share them, is from this kind of broader knowledge. So I would say that no one has to have their own NDE, but certainly by developing a regular program of centering prayer or meditation, any way you have of going within consciousness and kind of bypassing the little ego voice, which is always using fear and anxiety as its tools. But I found that very easy to do for anyone who needs a tool. I use binaural beat brainwave entrainment. Sacredacoustics.com would be the place you could find out more about that. But really, it's just a way of devoting time to going within mind, and realizing that that is really a shared mind with the God force of the universe that we all have access to. And I think that's how any of us can develop a more profound kind of trust and ability to interact with our higher soul and with that God force, that God mind at the core of all reality, to bring wholeness and healing into our lives.
Mhm. Eben, one question on you. What do you say to Anke's near-death experience, to her words?
Oh, I thought it was beautiful. I love the sharing, the way she went into that space and the description of that beautiful ocean of love, and coming back and really having the trust in the universe to never have to worry about making choices out of fear again, but to know that love is the pathway to the proper choices in our life: kindness, compassion, mercy, acceptance. I loved her sharing. Thank you so much for sharing that, Anke. I mean, I hear so many NDEs that to me kind of reawaken in me the kind of passion and the power and the love and the sense that I can trust in the universe, that we will be taken care of. And these NDEs to me are a beautiful way of doing that. And I love how Neale brought up a little while ago how beautiful that realm is. But I will also say that I came to recognize in my journey, not so much in the NDE, because I had amnesia as a giant part of what I had to learn. I go into detail about that, especially in our third book, Living in a Mindful Universe. But really, that coming into trusting in that love and realizing that this world is where we get the work done, the spiritual work. So in many ways, when you talk to near-death experiencers and find out why did they come back? Well, yes, as Neale said, they admit to the beauty and the comfort and the love and the natural kind of home of that experience. And yet they come back because of a sense of responsibility to others. So, a child they have to take care of, a parent, some other unfinished task in this world. And to me, that's the important reason. I don't want anyone thinking, that world is so beautiful. Why not just leave this world intentionally and go forever to that world? Because, suicide is not a very good option, because it bypasses, it's a spiritual bypass. And we just end up getting the same issues in our life reshuffled the next go round. So that's just my advice to people, not to be seduced by the stories of how beautiful and loving that world is, to try and end your physical life here prematurely, I would say.
Eben, I missed the title of your book, Living in a what kind of universe?
Living in a mindful universe. I co-wrote
mindful,
that with Karen Newell.
mindful.
Yeah, the main reason we wrote that was scientists were already pointing out, like in a case report about my medical records, that the most remarkable thing about my case is that the documented damage to my neocortex would not have allowed for any dream or hallucination. And that was made crystal clear in the case report. It was in Journal of Nervous and Mental Disease, September 2018, on my medical records. But they also point out not only was my brain incapable of any dream or hallucination, and therefore, wow, how do you explain this extraordinary experience I had? But also, how do you explain this remarkable healing that was unprecedented in the medical literature for me to come back to this world and be fully cured within 2 months of returning? Really demanded explanation. And in fact, the peer review scientists challenged the authors of that case report. How do you explain this unprecedented, apparently miraculous recovery? And they said it's because he had a near-death experience. And I think it's very admirable that the peer review editors of a scientific journal like that said, yes, now we have an explanation we can go with. They knew of other cases of near-death experiences, profound spiritual journeys that were also associated with a tremendous amount of healing far beyond anything we could explain from our kind of Western medical interpretation of medical data. And that's because these spiritual journeys allow us to, rise above and go beyond the expectations in our modern culture of what should be expected in any form of healing. We really can start to manifest healing that goes far beyond the average expected, because we're dealing with this rich spiritual energy of love and compassion, of able to bring healing and wholeness into our lives.
When love touches life, then is there the peace our world needs. And there's the healing.
Mm.
When you live your love and you love your life, there is the peace we need and the healing we need.
Right.
There's life forever, not in our body, but there is this life forever we think about every day.
Mm. Guyus.
I'm a big supporter of reincarnation and a believer that we do or can transcend from the human vessel. So I'm open, to the possibility that, for example, Dr. Alexander did experience where his consciousness transcended from the human vessel. But the question I would like to ask him is, even that being the case, and I know he has to struggle with convincing people that it wasn't a hallucination and it wasn't a dream, but even still, once the consciousness transcends the human vessel, are you open to the possibility that you still could have entered into a dream state? And the reason why I ask that is because when I research NDEs, the accounts that I'm often hearing, it often sounds very dreamlike and very fantastic. So even as someone who believes that you made that transition, do you think you could have still been in a dreamlike state?
The case report that I just mentioned goes into great detail in terms of documenting kind of the damage to my neocortex and brainstem. And I think the general interpretation of that information is that my neocortex was far too damaged to support a dream or hallucination. And what I went through was far more real, detailed, alive, meaningful, and transformational than any dream I'd ever experienced. So what I've described in my journey, the starting in that earthworm's eye view, ascending through a light portal into the rich ultra reality of the Gateway Valley, and then through yet another musical portal that was generated by angels and chants and anthems and hymns that were enlivening all the existence in that beautiful ultra real Gateway Valley, provided yet the next portal up to the highest level, where it was a complete oneness, unification with that God force. I mean, it was far, far more going on than any dream I'd ever had. And not only that, it was happening at a time when the medical facts of my case, all lobes of my brain with full thickness of damage, according to MRI and CTs, my neurologic exams, Glasgow Coma Scale, every bit of that shows that was a brain that was in no way able to put out any kind of dream or hallucination. This is what haunted me when I was first reviewing my medical records and trying to make sense of my case, was I realized that that brain that I was studying in the months after my coma, my own brain during my week-long coma due to E. coli meningoencephalitis, couldn't have produced a dream or hallucination. But in many ways, that just confirmed, of course, having something way too real to be real only could happen when my brain was so demonstrably offline. And I think that's very important. The other thing that I point out in the book, Proof of Heaven, is a comparison between the events of the deep coma journey during that 7 days in coma, compared with the 36 hours after I came out of coma, when I was in and out of a paranoid delusional psychotic nightmare and what we call an ICU psychosis. Those memories vanished within weeks. The memories from the deep coma experience, when my brain was most offline, those memories are as sharp and resilient, detailed, and stable over 15 years, as if the whole thing happened yesterday morning. That's a major distinction between those kinds of memories. Other groups have studied NDE memories and find that they're much more real than the memories of dreams or hallucinations. In fact, they're much more akin to the stability and resilience of memories that come from very strong, lived, challenging events like a car wreck or a plane crash or something like that. Those kind of memories get burned into us and very long lasting. And similar is the case with NDE memories. When you look at the work of Bruce Grayson, other NDE scientists in Italy have reported the same thing. But these memories are very different from the memories of a dream or hallucination. And of course, also remember that most people describing near-death experiences say that what they go through, and especially including a life review, is much more real than the living of events in these bodies in this material realm. So to assume that life reviews are just a vague, kind of dreamy return to vague memories is not true at all. Many people describe them as a reliving of events, and not only that, reliving from the perspective of everyone involved. That's why life reviews, in many ways, are telling us that the golden rule, treat others as you would like to be treated, is written into the very fabric of the universe. Because the life reviews and NDEs are very much a transpersonal experience involving all souls that were engaged in any of the actions of our lifetime.
I guess my next question would be, is like I don't doubt that it was that it could have been a real experience, whatever the nature of that is, that your consciousness was experiencing those things, and that it did in fact separate. And putting the human vessel out of the equation, let's say it's completely damaged, it's gone, just consciousness. Do you think it's possible to go into a dreamlike state where that's just how the universe kind of communicates itself to you? It's kind of a weird quasi state to even be in. And again, I ask that because when I listen to these accounts, there's a lot of like instant shifting and just weird, scenarios. Just like, being on the tip of the butterfly wing. Would you say that butterfly, for example, actually existed in the physical world or somewhere out there?
No, not at all. That's a giant mistake that I think people make in trying to interpret these. In fact, what I would tell you is everything we witness out in that physical world is actually within mind. And that's one of the deepest and most profound lessons of quantum physics in the current era, is that there is no physical world, objective physical world out there that's independent of the active observation by the sentient being. So in other words, go back to square one.
Do you believe there, even if it's within the mind, don't you believe that there's rules to that situation?
Oh, there absolutely are rules. And I mean, what we see, for example, what we call the physical laws of the universe in many ways are the laws of engagement of how that world can manifest to us. But the most interesting thing is, and this is where we go in our book, Living in a Mindful Universe, is where the scientific community is headed on this. You really have to go back to square one and start recognizing that all this world out there, the brain and mind are very clever at convincing us that that physical world out there is out there as it appears. And yet when people go through these kinds of extraordinary experiences, near-death experiences and related experiences, you start to realize that that mode of engagement with, a reality is only one mode, and that there are others that we have access to. And that includes modes that can transcend beyond space and time in many ways. I mean, when you're at that deep spiritual level where you'd have a life review, you're actually at a place where you're completely beyond time. The very fact that it's a reliving of events, not just a remembering, and that it's from multiple perspectives of all involved, tells you we're in a much bigger theater of operations, much grander than just this kind of minuscule little physical world that's put together for us to live in these bodies while we're living these lives. But in fact, in meditation, I think one of the points you're trying to make is that sleep space, the dream space, is very much related to the spiritual space. And I'd say, yes, there's a tremendous amount of overlap there. And that's why people can induce out-of-body experiences and start getting into that kind of spiritual territory. Now, it's, as Anke was saying, it's not the same. Many out-of-body experiences I've heard of do not seem to have involved a deep dive into the spiritual levels of, say, an NDE. And yet I think they're entering the same kind of territory. And the last little point I'd like to make about that is by comparing that space also to the space that's encountered by people who use psychedelic substances like psilocybin, magic mushrooms, LSD, DMT, et cetera. And the reason I bring all that up, and again, this is something we discuss in Living in a Mindful Universe, but it has to do with the fact that neuroscientists who use functional MRI, magnetoencephalography, other ways of really getting a detailed look at the brain, people taking those kinds of psychedelic substances, never call them a hallucinogen. Entheogen might be a better word. That means, God within, that kind of thing. But to call it hallucinogen misses the reality of what it's showing us. But the whole reason I mention this is that the functional MRI, magnetoencephalography will reveal that on those substances, your brain is dissolving. It's actually the mental components, like the default mode network, a very active network that's kind of the, being an ego in the here and now, that whole network dissolves under the influence of these substances. And in fact, there's no part of the brain that shows an increase in activity when you're on psilocybin, LSD, or DMT. All of it is decreasing. And, that completely violates what any materialist would think is going on in the brain under the influence of such substances. But to find the nature of what is occurring when you take those substances, you have to go beyond the brain. The brain is simply getting out of the way. It's another beautiful example about how memories and consciousness are not resident in the physical brain itself, but the brain serves as a filter or a transceiver that allows us to have access to those spiritual realms. But ultimately, that's why when you're liberated from the shackles of the brain and the body at the time of bodily death, your awareness expands much more greatly to being able to witness your entire life relived simultaneously.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting, Dr. Eben Alexander. And we must say at this point, we have Martin Sagel here, and he has something for us that could also interesting for Neale. Okay, Martin, now is your turn.
No, I just wanted to ask Neale, what is the Catholic Pope saying about that?
What is who saying it? The Pope?
Catholic Pope, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah.
No, it's one of his jokes.
Yeah.
I think we are all in common with this.
There's an interesting thing that I was told in my conversation with God, however, is that I did get into theology, of course, with God, and I And I said to God, what about the 10 commandments? You know, do I have to, if I don't obey those commandments, will I be sent to hell? And God said something astonishing to me. Neale, there's no such thing as the 10 commandments. You made it all up. But there are, what you are living is the 10 illusions of humans. And she convinced me that exactly what Eben just said to us, I was told in a different context, but God told me the same thing. Nothing you see is real. You're making it all up. So when I woke up out of my out-of-body experiences, I woke up with two words in my mind. I mean, deal with this, move forward with your life. These are the two words I was given. Nothing matters. I was, what? Nothing matters? God said to me, nothing has any meaning save the meaning you give it. It changed my whole life overnight. I haven't had the education that Eben has had. You know, I didn't go to, barely graduated from high school. I went to college. I was in college for about 6 weeks before the Dean of Men invited me to leave because he noticed I wasn't even bothering to attend class. So I have no college education. I'm, academically speaking, bereft of any informal training. So where did this come from? Where does that kind of information come from? How does it come that I'm not bragging, just saying, I asked the question. Where does it come from that I have the same experience internally that Eben has with all of his training and all of his experience? And I beg to differ that my own out-of-body experience, although it was not a near-death experience, had every bit as much of spiritual content, including, by the way, a life review, in which I was allowed to experience not only everything that I ever did or said in my life, but how everyone else experienced it. I experienced it from their point of view. And I put this all in a book called Home with God, in a life that never ends. So when Eben talks about experiencing, your life from the other person's point of view, I'm sitting here going, so we have had identical experiences. So I think it's possible that an out-of-body experience could, in fact, nearly duplicate an NDE.
I have a
think they're
question.
certainly in the
Wait,
same
guys.
territory. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I agree with you. And no question, I promise you, my neurosurgical training and everything is not necessary to interpret all this, but it does come in handy because when people try and pretend, well, a scientist would say, there's no way you really have that experience. I can say, well, guess what? I work with a lot of scientists around the world, and the kind of information that comes from my case can tell you that these cases are very real. But the spiritual information certainly does not demand any of advanced degree at all. All it demands is an open soul that wants to learn about its relationship with the universe at large. And in many ways, I would say that a big education gets in your way. Having MDs and PhDs in many ways just means you've been brainwashed by the system far too much. Which is sad that people pay these huge dollars for education these days, and yet many advanced universities are not yet caught up to the deepest lessons about the nature of reality, consciousness, the mind-brain relation that's emerging from the scientific study of NDEs and the rest of these types of experiences. They're basically informing us of a far more unified, connected, and love-bound world than we would think with our little materialist thinking and education. So it's all about really rising above some of the greatest stupidity of our modern kind of educational systems and coming into a far greater wisdom.
Folks, those of you who are watching this podcast, listen to every word that this gentleman has been saying here. Take it down, record it. I hope you have a chance. This guy, every word out of his mouth is golden.
Guyus.
Yeah, I had a question for Neale. do you think God has the freedom of choice? In other words, do you think God could have chosen to have made the world any differently than it is?
Well, of course.
That yeah, the reason why I ask that is because there are certain things that I've been noticing that I observe over the years. For example, the pi of a circle, which must be 3.14, and just mathematics in general, or the airfoil shape of the wing of a plane. There seems to be all these things that's within this overall tapestry that is the universe, where it seems like it has to be that, and it's like this fixed eternal thing that can't change. So yeah, I was just curious if what your thoughts on that, like God couldn't make 1 + 2 = 36, for example. So there's all these, and I keep noticing it's not just within mathematics. It's just it's everywhere around us. You know, if you look at the nature of things, the nature of the universe, it just seems like it has to unfold the way that it unfolds.
Guyus, you're circling around the key question. What came first, the chicken or the egg?
Well, I think it's always been here.
If you're suggesting that God had no choice because things existed according to the laws, the so-called laws of the universe, you know, whether it's 1 + 1 = 2 or whatever the laws of the universe are, the law of gravity or whatever it is. I call it the law of opposites, by the way. But if your idea is that God had no choice but to create the universe inside of a container that respected the limitations and respected the parameters of certain universal laws, then we have a question that the universal question: what came first, the laws or the maker of the laws? My own idea about it, not to go on forever, but my own idea about it is that what I call the highest power, I like to use the word God, what I call God created the universe with such magnificent laws, with such specificity, with such mastery, that the laws have served physicality from the beginning and will until the end of time.
I guess that answers my second question, because I was going to ask, do you think the universe had a first-time creation point, or do you think the universe has always existed and always will exist? So I guess you're saying that there was a first-time creation point, and that God, apparently God, though, I guess you would believe that God is timeless and eternal, that at least whatever God is.
Guyus, where does the circle begin? Tell me where the circle begins and ends.
Well, in my view, I don't believe there is a beginning or an end, but I could be wrong. To me, it's an eternal thing. It seems like things defy first-time creation. For example, mathematics. It seems to defy. It didn't form for the first time in some type of Big Bang event, for example, and it seems like it's impossible for a God to decide to create these things the way they are, that they had to be what they are. But again, I could be wrong. I don't know.
Yeah. Who create, what came first, the chicken or the egg? We're now discovering that our universe is simply one of a universe of universes, if you please. We had the egotistical idea that our universe was all there is. Now it turns out that we live in a multiverse. Physicists are telling us that our universe is simply one part of a multiverse, the highest power that I call God always was, is now, and always will be. Explain that. How is that possible? You tell me. But what I know is that it's true. God always was, is now, and always will be. A circle has no beginning and it has no end. It simply is. And what God said to me in my conversations, Neale, everything is circular. There is no beginning and there is no end.
Yeah. Yeah, you take like certain concepts, like the concept of a door, or the concept of a doorknob, or a bicycle. The concept of a cup, that which is cupness. those are the things that when I think about them, they seem to kind of defy a first-time creation, because these concepts, that which is a door, that which is a hole, those are things that had to be, or that always are, I should say, that always existed, and they have a kind of a timeless, eternal nature to them. And it's not like God could have chosen to negate the existence of light, for example, or if we think of in terms of the yin and the yang, to remove the yang part of that system. But that system that I'm describing, that is the godness, that's God, and that's an eternal kind of a thing for me.
Well, I would say you're already into the realm of the eternal. It's what I call meta time or deep time, to even begin to explain life reviews in a near-death experience, for example. Because if you're in that stage and you can see your birth, death, everything in between, and you relive it from the perspective of all involved, that gives you kind of an idea of how you've transcended our normal concept of being limited in time and space. And that's why I say that realm, and you can achieve it through meditation, out-of-body experiences, et cetera, can be outside of our normal notions of temporal flow in the material realm. So you're already at a point where you're transcending our normal ideas of the restrictions of space and time for the lives that we live as humans. But getting more to your question, I would say that modern cosmology allows certainly for an infinite universe. I mean, we can talk about a Big Bang that happened 13.77 billion years ago, but that might have just been a punctuation mark. That's the way I phrase it in the book Proof of Heaven, and we discuss that much more in Living in a Mindful Universe. This whole notion of time, causality, beliefs about our interactions with that God force. And that's where I would say that ultimately I see our sentient, role as a soul as being co-creative of our emergent reality with that God force. And to beware of what you believe, because I love that quote from Kierkegaard. He said, there are two ways to be fooled. One is to refuse to believe what is true. The other is to believe what is not true. And I think in many ways, our modern societal beliefs lead us to great errors in terms of underestimating our potential as sentient beings and as souls that are actually eternal and not just a physical body that's here birth to death. So in terms of creativity, in terms of notions of free will, we discuss that in great detail in Living in a Mindful Universe, because I think you can move far beyond some of our current societal beliefs about free will and about our abilities to manifest the world of our dreams.
Mm-hmm. I wish that my time was unlimited, but I did set aside this hour, and I now must say goodbye to all of you wonderful people, which I hate to do. But it's been thank you for allowing me to be part of this time with you. Thank you all for your wonderful contributions to my life today. Yeah. What a glorious experience this has been with all of you.
Please, one thing for all of you, if you don't know this movie, Waking Life, I would like to tell you, try to watch it, because it's something like near-death experience, out-of-body experience, lucid dreaming. Waking Life, very great movie.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. And Neale, if you want, you can tell about your new book, 1 or 2 minutes.
Neale, yeah.
I have a new book out called GodTalk. Thanks for being here, guys. Bye for now.
Thank you. Neale, it was great with you. It was great with you. Yeah.
Thank you.
We see us again.
Much.
We see us again, my friend.
It was a pleasure to see you again. So
wonderful.
have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Good meeting you, Neale.
Bye.
Have a nice day.